Alright guys, today is going to be all about the Texas rig. Before we get started, I want to go ahead and say thank you to everybody for continuing to support me after this past year. This is a dumb, crazy little hobby that I jumped into, and you guys have been awesome. I really appreciate that. And if you haven't yet, please hit the subscribe button, like this video if you enjoy the content. Let's get into it. Alright, the first thing we're going to get into Texas rigs, we're going to talk about our equipment. The brand doesn't necessarily matter as much. I'm a Shimano guy. You can pick your poison. It doesn't really matter. It's whatever you feel comfortable with, but there are a couple little things that are universal across the board. Whenever I throw a Texas rig, I like to be on a heavy rod. This Shimano rod here is a 7'5" heavy fast action rod. I prefer a heavy one because with a Texas rig, more so than not, you're really having to set that hook. And with the type of hooks that you use, which we're going to get into in a little bit, the ones that I prefer, you normally turn it and hook them right in the top of the mouth. So in order to get a good penetration and hold that fish, you got to really have a rod with a backbone that can set that hook for you. Now the reel, this is a Shimano SLX DC. It is the 8.2 to 1 gear ratio. I like a quick reel. On a lot of my outfits, I have something around the 7.0 range, but when I'm running a Texas rig, I want something with a quick reel. And the reason is, I just like the Texas rig more than any other way of fishing. I'm not a real patient fisherman. I don't sit there all day with it in the water and just bop it and wait. So I use the quick reel to my advantage. If I'm pitching up under a dock or if I'm pitching up into some coverage, if I bounce this thing once or twice and nothing's hitting it, I want to get it back in the boat. So quicker reel means more casts, more attempts. So if the fish isn't there where you want it, you burn it back into the boat, you throw it back out, you try again. The quick reel really benefits you there. You don't wear yourself out as much over time. Another advantage to having a quick reel is if you do get that bite and you set that hook in, you want to get him back to the boat. You want to burn him in as quick as you can. You don't want that line to get loose. You hear everybody on Facebook, they always say the same, tight lines, everything. There's a great advantage to understanding what tight lines means. When you get that fish on, you want to keep that line tight. So if you can burn them back to the boat instead of a slow reel, there's a major benefit there. Now the line, I'm running braid to a leader. I'm not going to get into it with line. Every time I talk about line, I get into an argument with somebody. Use the line you're comfortable with. Today's not the day to talk about the line. However, I am running braid to a fluorocarbon leader. So we're going to get this thing lined up. Alright, so let's talk about what a Texas rig is. By definition, a Texas rig is basically just making whatever soft plastic that you have weedless. That's essentially what it is. If you hear somebody say, I have this jerk bait and I just put it on a Texas rig, what that means is they can throw into weeds and not get hung up. There's way more to it than that, but that's a simple definition. So hooks, there's several different hooks you can use with a Texas rig, and they all have their benefits and their drawbacks. You've got an offset straight hook, and you've got, yep, you guessed it, the straight hook. So if you run this on a straight hook, when you put your bait on there, that's the angle that you're going to be on. That straight hook will allow a little bit of that tip to stick out of the worm. Now the benefit of that is if a fish gets a hold of that, it's going to get stuck most of the time. The downside of that is everything's going to get stuck most of the time. So if you use an offset hook, you're going to be more down the center of that hook. So it's going to be a lot easier to get that to stay inside of your plastic. Now, one thing, if you hear somebody say Texpose it just basically means that when you put your hook through your bait, you are just barely going to have the skin poking on that hook. It's kind of the best of both worlds. You try to save yourself from getting hung up a little bit, and then also you try to stick the fish a little easier. So the third hook is going to be your EWG. Now this one, as you can tell, is going to flatten this bait out. So you're not going to have anything sticking up through the top of that bait. It's just going to be a straight line, and you can really hide these into your bait. A lot of the problems that people have with the EWG hook is the hookup ratio. You can just imagine when that fish comes in, it has to get in between that gap to get hooked. These do tend to roll around more, so you can catch more of a skin bite more than a roof of a mouth. They do work. A lot of people swear by them. A lot of people only use the EWG hook. So I'm not going to tell you what's best. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I want you to go try it. I want you to go get each one of them, and I want you to try them and see what you think. So let's get to putting this on. Okay, so now that we got our line on, we are going to run some bobber stops. I like to run a 3/8 ounce weight, and I'm running a bang stick from Z-Man. These bang sticks are made out of Elastex, which is really good. They're really stretchy. They don't tear. So the reason that I use a heavier weight with anything that's Elastex is because it's very buoyant. It floats up in the water and it takes it a while to sink. So I'll use a little bit heavier weight than I would with the traditional plastic. Now I will put bobber stops on either end of my weight for reasons that I'll explain here in just a minute. So put a bobber stop on, then you're going to run your weight. You're going to go into the tip. You want the point of it to be going towards the rod. Okay, so the flat part, this is kind of self-explanatory, but some of you guys might be new and you might be learning. So the flat part of your weight, that's where the hook's going to be. So they're going to, the bottom flat end of the weight and your hook are going to touch. So once you thread this on, we're going to put on another bobber stop. Now the reason that I put bobber stops on either end is so I can control where the weight goes. When I tie this hook on, I don't want the weight to come and slam into that hook and dislodge my bait or wreck the knot. And other times I like to run a Texas rig when I have it pinned to the hook. So that's what this other bobber stopper does. It allows me to put it to the hook and it won't be able to move. So whichever hook you choose to use, we're going to use the offset hook. And you're going to tie that on. And you're going to tie that on with your regular polymer knot. Now I've already done a video explaining the polymer knot and a couple other knots. I'll leave that down in the description. After you have the hook on, you're going to put your plastic, whatever plastic you choose. You're going to take the tip and go down the middle about a 1/4 inch or so, and then you're going to pop out the side. You're going to run it all the way up, and once you get to the top, you're going to rotate it 180 degrees, and then you're going to go up onto that offset. Okay, that's what you're left with. Now from here, you just simply see where your hook is going into your plastic, mark it off mentally, take it back, push it through, spin her up, and you want that hook to be covered with the plastic, so that makes you weedless. Now you can go through the weeds, you can bump up on things, and you're not going to get hung up. As soon as a fish grabs it, it's going to come in this way, and boom, he's hooked. Now let's talk about weight placement. So the weight placement, wherever you have that weight is going to sink faster. And with this Elastec, when this gets to the bottom, the buoyancy of this Elastec is going to allow this plastic to float, and it's going to sit there suspended. So the further down you have that weight, the higher the suspension of that is going to be. And if you're using a plastic that you want to use like a top of a creature bait or something that you want to move through the water, this is where you take this top bobber stop and you slide it all the way down and you peg the hook. So when you peg it, that weight is not moving. It stays there, and it just makes this like a missile just going through the water. And that happens with any kind of bait any kind of soft plastic that you have you want to use will work that same way. So depending on how you want to fish the Texas rig, those bobber stops allow you to adjust. If one's not working, you can adjust out and go to another one. I hope that helps you guys out. I'm not a big Texas rig guy, honestly. I do bust out the Texas rig every now and then whenever I want to peg it down, use it like a big Ned rig. That's mostly what I use it for. But there's no denying this thing has produced, it's caught fish, it's won trophy. Just because I'm not a big fan of it doesn't mean it's not going to work. And I hope it works for you a lot more than it works for me. Maybe your patience is better. I'm not sure. Fishing's fishing. Get them in a boat however you can do it. If you got any more questions, if I didn't touch on anything that you're curious about, just drop a comment down there. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys have regarding this or anything else. Just let me know what you want to see. Let me know what you want to discuss. Guys, until next time, get out there and go fishing. We'll see you.